I'm both an active investor and a passive investor. So I do LP investments, and I've investigated or done due diligence on a lot of LP investments for myself, for my clients, as a registered investment advisor and financial advisor. Like, I do a lot of reviews for my clients. Being able to manage operations well in order to protect investor capital, not just return, but protect investor capital. Every single cycle, I always have at least one LP investment that dies. And I don't just lose my return, I lose my principal.
I am Christina Suter, and this is the Real Estate Breakthrough Show, where we talk about the reality of real estate, the mindset you need in order to face the reality of what it is, and tips and tricks to get you moving forward in investing. I am your host, Christina Suter.
Hey you, this is Christina Suter with Real Estate Breakthrough, and I have Ashley Wilson with me from Bar Down Investments. And I know that Ashley might be up to other things, and maybe she'll tell us about other things, but I had Bar Down Investments before on this show. You guys may remember, it's probably about 9 months ago. But one of the things I was impressed with was Ashley and I were on a panel together on Bronson Hill's podcast, and it was with Vina Jetty, and we riffed on the concept of female leadership, and I want to double down on that a little bit for all of us together today. But first, let me have Ashley introduce herself so she can tell us why she's a super cool human being and why we should listen to her. Ashley, go to town, babe.
So I started in real estate in 2009 with my first single family home purchase. And honestly, I've done a little bit of everything. So I came from corporate America, so I have a little bit of influence of structure and corporations and how major corporations operate. Specifically, I worked in clinical R&D and I worked on a global capacity. So one of my superpowers is managing from afar and building businesses from afar. Mm-hmm. But the other piece to my story is my dad is a general contractor. So I've always known real estate. I've always known construction. So I came at it from a unique angle. Most folks who fall into real estate typically learn by failing, so to speak, with when it comes to construction and renovation, or they come at it from a very financially stable way. So they're investing in a more strategic, analytical way through passive investing. Specifically for me, I've done, as I mentioned before, a little bit of everything. I've done flipping, short-term rentals, long-term rentals, high-end flipping, note investing, and then in commercial real estate, I specifically do large multifamily properties. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. Outside of real estate, I have other companies. I have a tech company, and I'm on my 7th company. So I love building businesses. And I love using real estate as a vehicle to have financial freedom, but also operate and run businesses that help other folks tap into financial freedom as well.
Beautiful. Well said. Well said. So, I in Bar Down Investments, that's the one that, that I know you through, but I'm going to ask about the other companies, just giving you a heads up. What do you think is the secret sauce for Bar Down Investments? How do you feel like that you guys really anchor your particular skill set, your focus, and multifamily, I believe, is what you guys focus on, and how you protect your investors?
So the origin of the name Bar Down comes from a shot in sports where you hit the top of the crossbar and then the puck or ball goes in the net. It's a high precision shot that takes a lot of reps to be able to achieve. And that is our whole business model for Bar Down Investments. So essentially, we're not a volume company. If you're looking to invest all the time and throw capital in a passive investment quarterly, we're not the company for you. In fact, we've gone 3 years without an acquisition because we just over scrutinize investments. And I think that positions us very differently than everyone else, because a lot of other companies built their business model around volume. So the overhead of staff is supplemented through acquisitions and through fee structures. We built our business on a completely different model so that we wouldn't need this high volume of transactions to grow our company. It was more based on our ability to execute on a quality basis. So everything we do is centered around that, which it's kind of less is more, less assets actually, but stronger performing assets is something that we really pride ourselves on. We've never had a capital call. That is very unique, especially in this environment.
Yes.
But that's something that I think people are really respectful of. And if I can just add one more
Please.
thing, without being super long-winded, which I already have been,
You're
but
good.
one thing that set us apart is we don't really care what the masses are doing. So we stopped distributions super early on. In fact, I can't even begin to tell you how angry investors were when we turned off distributions across our assets. And we did it at least 6 months, if not a year, prior to everyone else doing it. And the writing was on the wall, and it's because we are so detail focused. We knew and saw the rising interest rates, the insurance, taxes, and we knew that there was going to be a catch up period. And we didn't want to do a distribution to then turn around and do a capital call, which a lot of folks did. So nowadays, investors are singing our praises, saying how smart we are. I don't know if I would attribute that to being intelligent or really centered on the fact that your number one responsibility when taking investors' capital is to protect that capital. How you do it is through operating successful ventures, but your number one responsibility is to protect the capital. And then as long as you do that well, you can obviously return it with friends, distributions and profits.
You said that so well. There was, the protection of capital, like your number one duty is good operations so you can protect capital. Like you've summed up in a very short sentence the sort of over-bridging concept. So I'm both an active investor and a passive investor. So I do LP investments, and I've investigated or done, due diligence on a lot of LP investments for myself, for my clients, as a registered investment advisor and financial advisor. Like I do a lot of reviews for my clients. So that piece, being able to manage operations well in order to protect investor capital, not just return, but protect investor capital. Thus, the stopping distributions way early when the writing was on the wall that inherently the numbers say if we have this type of loan and interest rates are increasing, our payments are going to go up, and therefore we need to double down on reserves in order to manage those payments because we don't know how long for sure that those payments are going to go up for, but at least 18 months to 2 years based upon history in the charts. That's what we can anticipate. So if we can start building up early a reserve to manage at least a 2-year increase in our payments, we're probably going to be much better at protecting investors' capital, which ultimately means you can return the principal, but also be able to return the friends, the interest with that. Because every single cycle, I always have at least one LP investment that dies. And I don't just lose my return, I lose my principal. And it's shifted how I invest. I now calculate, I'm going to put less than 10%, right? The rule of thumb in the financial institution realm is you do less than 10% or 10% in any particular passive investment where you don't have control. I don't even do 10% anymore. That doesn't feel safe to me, given I know in every cycle I'm going to lose at least one in its entirety.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's further complicated based off of the popularity of bridge loans prior to COVID, because we had these interest rates that were going down at such a high velocity that like it was Pavlov's dog situation where people were just literally salivating over the option to go with this variable interest rate debt. Now, without going too much into the weeds, that also factors into your accrual because you're essentially getting a rate cap to protect yourself when those interest rates inevitably go back up, and it speaks to the volatility in the market and all these other variables. But ultimately, if you're not looking at both a micro and macro view of your investments, which when I talk to my colleagues, it's one or the other. I find that people are either too much in the weeds or they're too high level. They're unable to manage or have someone manage day to day. So I think that one thing that I do particularly well, besides managing from afar, is I can also change my lens very, very quickly, which makes me really good at making decisions quickly because I'm able to factor in both the impact on a day-to-day basis and then also a global impact. I think that comes from, and I know it comes from studying intently. So it's both a strength and weakness of mine. When I don't understand something, I have to know every single aspect of it. And then I get bored. It's the reason I left flipping. I was flipping with my dad. There was no reason for me not to leave. We're making hand over fist in profit in this company. It was just a machine. But intellectually, I can't stay in something that I'm not intellectually challenged on. And to me, flipping was rinse and repeat. The reason I gravitate to multifamily is it's such a complex problem if you really truly understand it. So that to me makes the importance of finding a good operator, whether you're partnering as a GP or if you're looking to passively invest, to me, that is the number one thing that you should consider when passively investing. It's the number one thing I consider when passively investing in the same asset class. I think that's the make or break.
I agree. I agree 1,000,000%. I feel like when that got so crystal clear for me was in the 2007, 8, and 9 downturn. And then again, I saw it distinctly for some clients of mine in the 2015, 2018 bracket, where companies that should have been doing perfectly well and had done perfectly well under like a charismatic leader or the original leader, but now had been handed down to the next level. It was interesting to sit there and have a conversation with the original founder of this. So it was a client of mine. The investment was failing. They were losing all their capital, not just their interest. And so we had a phone call, and we were lucky to get a phone call with the head of the company, which is great and unusual, right? And it was interesting to watch the head of the company sort of take in and calculate what had gone wrong, because it was clear in my mind, because all the time I had done the diligence on the company, I'd been tracking it for years, probably over 8 years. I could see that it was working, and then it failed, right? And I could see almost in his brain, like, I didn't calculate this ever failing. This was not how I had originally structured the company and the way it worked. And so there was this one choice that was made to shift this buy price from here, from this set of factors to this set of factors, and it let the buy price be higher. And that was the problem. And that's what failed the company. And it was a change in leadership, and it only confirmed for me, right, like the original leadership, he had thought through all that. He understood the details of how that worked. And then the next generation went, okay, well, let's just move this line. And I was like, no, that was a decision made inside of your company, inside of your staffing. And I don't even think he was aware of it, because he had handed the company over to that next generation of people. So I felt both sad and respected this human being I was talking to, whose company was now failing, and he was taking the chops. He just took it and took ownership of it as best as he could and was trying to fix it. And I respected him as a human being. The problem had gotten bigger than he could solve, but I respected who he was trying to be in that moment. And so to see a company fail and still respect the human being that was in the middle of it was wonderful. It was a great experience to be able to have that and then really go, yeah, it really is 100%. Some say 51%, but I'm like, no, it's kind of 100% who the operator is. The deal's going to work or it's not going to work, and you can usually tell on the level of due diligence whether the deal's going to work or not. Are they that lost that the deal itself isn't going to work? Like, you kind of know that before you walk in, if you've been at it for a little while or you have a mentor or somebody who's, looking over your shoulder. Then it boils down to who are the individuals that are in the deal and the choices they make.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also how quickly they move. Like, one thing I said earlier was, one of my superpowers is the ability to make decisions quickly. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean those decisions are right? Like, okay. I do tend to have a high hit rate in terms of making strong decisions, but not every decision I make is right. Mm-hmm. But the ability to see that it's wrong and then course correct and try another solution, that's the difference. Like, the difference between millionaires and billionaires are that you're just making decisions faster and they're getting to the failure faster and then adjusting, pivoting, and trying another thing. And they're failing faster. Their hit rate, the frequency, if you want to talk about the 10,000 hour rule, they're hitting the 10,000 hours faster than we are. So to me, what an incredible story and experience to have respect for someone who was not having a good hit rate, but you knew that their heart and their motivation and that they were trying and doing everything within their power. I mean, that rarely happens, not only in that particular situation of the person owning it, but then also for someone to actually recognize it, I think is also rare too. So hats off to both of you for that, because that is a really great life lesson on both fronts.
And again, Ashley, you just said something so genius. I love it because when you say it, I like get tickles inside. Where you talked about the difference between millionaires and billionaires, and that one of that differences is that billionaires are making decisions faster. They're not necessarily always making better decisions, but they're making those decisions faster, and they're willing to course correct more quickly. And that velocity of being willing to make a decision and then recognize the shortcomings of that decision and make a new decision is what actually creates the capacity to keep adjusting a successful company and adjusting it quickly, which allows it to grow faster as long as you have staffing underneath you. So it was like, that was so well said, like the precise moment. It was beautiful. So let's talk a little bit about female leadership, and I'll tell my story now. I wouldn't tell you before. So last night I was at a meeting, and it was a networking meeting, and we announced a new FIBI women's group, and it was not for women only, but it was women-led, and therefore would focus on women. And one of the announcers, who was a man, said women's issues, because he kind of like stumbled on himself. And then one of my students at the end of the night was like, women's issues? What does he mean by women's issues? We don't have any issues. And I was like, wow, that's right. That's right. That can be a true trigger to say women's issues. And the thing I landed on was, okay, he stumbled in his words, and let's give him some grace around that. But women leadership, right? Like, what does a women's group want to focus on? Maybe is the style of women's leadership, right? And Vina Jetty has very strong opinions about women's leadership and what that means. You lead in multiple different companies, not just in Bar Down Investments isn't the only voice that you have. You're a strong voice in other companies. So tell us a little bit about the other companies, and then let's riff a little bit on women's leadership.
Yeah, so I started Bar Down in, I think it was 2017, and that came about because I think actually, sorry, I'll correct myself. I think it was 2018. That came about because people recognized that I was focusing on operations, and I was shouting it from the rooftop saying that operations matters in any market, but it's the most important in a down market, and we're overdue for a recession. Mm-hmm. So people should be focusing on this and not just praying for compressed cap rates to bail them out. Right. And I got approached by 70 different groups, very, very famous groups that most people know, and they asked me to come on and be a partner and or employee, depending on the situation, and manage their operations. And I ran through all these operations, and I said, at the end of the day, whoever's operating these properties, that's who gets the reputation, not the poor underwriting. And going through the process, I realized they were set up to fail. Only in a perfect market would these deals be able to exit successfully, and I didn't want my name tied to them. Mm-hmm. So I started Bar Down Investments. Okay. Second company was that I, within the past 5 years or so created was Apartment Addicts, and I created that with my partner, who I later brought onto Bar Down Investments, Jay Scott. And we started Apartment Addicts because we looked around and realized that all of these coaching programs teach you how to find and raise the money, so fund the properties and the investments, but no one teaches you how to actually operate and exit them. And it was, I know this is a gruesome parallel, but it really kind of drives home the point. It was like during 9/11, when the terrorists were going to flight school to learn how to take off on the plane and fly the plane, but no one
Taught them to
showed up
land.
for how to actually land the plane, right? And that is a very telltale sign of the dangers that you can get into when you don't know how to operate. So we were adamant that we wanted to create a full comprehensive program, because our full belief system is that you can't underwrite correctly unless you also know how to operate. That was our whole thesis. So we were like, if you know how to operate and you know how to sell, you also know the tricks and nuances that someone could be doing on the sales side to look out for on the buy side. It's a full life cycle. So we started Apartment Addicts. And then later, in the past 2 years, I actually launched a company called Conference Connect, which most people are like, that seems like a bit of like a sidestep. But I am a huge believer that the audience is just a mirror of who's on stage. So if you have all men on stage, typically you have a very male dominated audience. And I'm a huge believer that if you want to go where the opportunities are, they're not on the golf courses anymore, they're at conferences. So if you want diverse people to be able to tap into diverse opportunities, you have to have diverse speakers bringing them into the room. It's the reason I wrote the book, and instead of writing it myself, I asked 19 other women to co-author the book with me. I noticed keynote speakers all had a book behind their name, and I thought, okay, we need more women to speak in real estate. I'm going to provide a platform, invite 19 women. Now we all have a best-selling book that we can use to leverage to keynote speak. All of these things aren't to take away, like if you notice, like I'm not trying to take away from men, I'm trying to complement and provide diversity. I, like you, was a psychology undergrad, and in psychology, one of the studies I remember learning about was homogeneous groups arrive at conclusions the quickest, but heterogeneous groups arrive at the best solution. They may take longer to achieve, but greater things come out of heterogeneous groups. I'm a firm believer in that. And I believe that diversity across all measures, it doesn't matter if we're talking about gender or age or demographics, leads to better solutions, which help us globally, like a better impact, not only for the industry, which there are so many shortfalls in real estate right now, but also just impact when it comes to something that's so near and dear and sacred to every human being, which is housing. We have an epidemic in housing affordability right now. We could blame it on regulation. We can blame it on regulation tied to affordability. We can blame it on scarcity, challenges with technological development, but ultimately we have this huge problem, and I feel like collectively we can solve this. So I'm not trying to, as a woman, stand on the toes or say that I can't stand with my male counterparts. I think that our male counterparts have done an incredible job. I think we can complement and help the progress moving forward to help a greater problem that needs to be solved, that has yet to be solved. So I look at women leadership as an ability to bring a fresh perspective into this space that can create solutions on a magnitude that haven't been unlocked yet. And that's where I think we can really carve a way for not only women who are in positions to make an impact with us today, but our next generation. We can inspire people to see that, okay, this is an industry that I have an invitation to join.
Again, I so appreciate how you said it. It's in I have two things I want to say, and one's probably fine and one might be inflammatory. One of the things I want to say is that I'm a great believer that diversity of team is what brings out a better result, right? And like you talked about, homogeneous versus heterogeneous, right? What are we going to find, and how is that going to work correctly? And I'm not even sure I said that correctly, that last statement, but hey, the point is diversity, or people who have a very similar point of view. I think that women have certain strengths and men have certain strengths. And women, in my mind, we have a bigger corpus callosum, we have a bigger connection between the right and left hand sides of the brain. We're maybe better at making diversified decisions or awareness of diversified elements within a system. And what do those elements do when they weigh against each other to create a result? Now, that's a piece of the decision-making process, and that's a piece of the implementation process. One of the things that I think that men are incredibly good at, and I use men on my team intentionally at, is they will go very deep, very hard into this particular area. Research the crap out of this. Give me the answer on this. And they will go single-focused, very deep in understanding that answer. And or they will create momentum. Look, I really need this project to get moving along. Can you get behind this project and give it the speed, give it the momentum, give it the force it needs to move forward, right? And I feel that when I have men on my team in relationship with women, that I get this momentum that shows up in the team that's useful and energetic for the company or for what we're trying to create in the project. And that diversity works when we have a good working relationship as a team, right? And I think men have done an amazing job of creating the safety of this world we live in. Like, now, whether it was purely through quote unquote male dominance or whether it is purely through male talent, that we have so many apartment buildings, so many skyscrapers, so many roads, so much structure. You know, the Romans used to build roads when they walked, right? The Roman armies. And that's part of how a lot of roads got built in Europe, was because the Roman armies literally built them as they were walking through, certain parts of the country. So I think that there's a value to that. And so I get worried that women will undervalue the contribution that men can make as we learn to value the contribution we make.
I agree with you, which is why, I'm invited pretty often to speak. There are very few women in commercial real estate that are going around and touring. So I get invited often to speak on panels on this particular topic. And I couldn't agree with you more. I always think of it as a complementary moving forward process that we can work together on. I don't see it in spite of. I also think that there's a piece to this, and honestly, I've never really said this publicly, but this is where I think we are going, and I think a lot of people are acknowledging this maybe. Maybe they know it, maybe they don't know it, which is everyone's talking about this huge transfer of wealth that's happening right now with the baby boomer population, and that we are having the largest transfer of wealth in U.S. history, okay? That's a fact. It's also a fact that women outlive men 6 to 8 years on average. That's a fact. It's also a fact that women are more likely to take care of their parents over men. That's a fact. There's a higher percentage of daughters caring for their parents than vice versa. That's a fact. It's also a fact that when we look at the historic positioning of genders, and I brought this up in my forward of my book, which is the historically, women were not encouraged to work. Then they were encouraged to work in administrative positions. Then they were encouraged to work in other positions. And only recently have they been encouraged to go into STEM fields. And I feel that it's kind of like building a house. Mathematics is really the foundation. Financial literacy is the walls of the house. And then the roof of the house is actual investing, right? Taking action upon all the things that you've learned. So I think from a societal point of view, in terms of women's competency when it comes to making financial decisions, there is a huge shift in that transfer of wealth, and this is my thesis, being allocated to women. So I think not only is there this huge transfer of wealth, I think that we will be setting records of that going to women in the future versus historically how it's gone to men is kind of like the carrier of the family name and the historic nature in which men have carried families forward. So I think that there is an opportunity before us than ever before for not only women to be in a position of financial literacy and being able to take action, but actually having the finances behind them to be taken seriously as well.
Yeah, and being the decision makers. I mean,
They're the decision makers.
if the capital is in their name, then they often. I mean, I don't know. At least I observe in my circle. So I agree with you. I agree with you, and if I may interrupt and add something to it, I've noticed in my circle of women. So I live in Pasadena, and in Pasadena there's a lot of wealth and a lot of generational wealth, right? And I've noticed in my circle that a lot of the women who are the ones who inherited maintain control, not hopefully not punitively, but they maintain some version of control over. Well, it's my assets, it's my decision. Right. And as was the case for men, it's my assets, it's my decision. I might listen to my wife or I might listen to my partner, but it's my assets, ultimately it's my decision. I am the one who signs the contract because it's my wealth and the bank account. And so I'm the one who makes the transfer because it's my wealth and the bank account. So I think that there's just a clarity in what you're saying, because mathematically that adds up. What that means moving forward is that I think women will have more power financially. Not only will they have more power because society gives us a larger voice, but also have more power because we are the decision makers, as in the accounts are in the name of the female. And I think that will shift and accelerate this shift that's happening. And I don't even know how much that transfer of wealth specifically to the feminine versus to the masculine. I don't know what percentage that is or isn't, but I'm looking forward to seeing the numbers around that, because I think that will be a fun sort of hidden fact that I haven't heard of before and will make a difference. How big, what percentage? Yep. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And just to kind of look back, it wasn't too long ago where I'm a very analytical person, so I was contributing to the problem, so 1 out of 10 women that I spoke with would move forward with investing where, I could get over 50% when I'm talking to 10 men. So what did I naturally do? I naturally only targeted men when presenting investment opportunities, because I knew I had a higher hit rate of getting conversion. And we're humans, we operate in an efficient way, right? So having women have the access and the financial literacy, we already have the data that shows us that women historically, and it's been repeated over generations, make better financial decisions when it comes to investing. But then to also have more access to capital, I think is really going to change the investing world overall.
Yes, I think that's a very good point, and I look forward to it. I hate to say it that we're basically out of time, but I have to ask one final question, if I may. Sure. So the name of the show is Real Estate Breakthrough, because I am a great proponent and supporter of using real estate to break through to your financial freedom. So tell me a little bit about why, even though real estate can be hard and it can be challenging, that you continue to use real estate, and what does financial freedom mean to you?
Great question. So for the first question, I always like to say that if you were to play Monopoly, you would, without knowing the rules, you would go around and try to buy as many properties as possible. And that's what you would think the strategy of the game is. But once you learn the rules, you realize that some properties have more value than others. And it's not about buying every property, it's buying the right properties and building houses and hotels as fast as possible. Knowing that little nuance changes how you play the game, because it tells you, okay, I got to save up my capital for when I land on Park Place and Boardwalk and not spend it on, I don't even know, but the properties that are like $60,
right. Yep, I do. And they're orange, and there's a yellow on the other side. They're orange on that side, they're yellow on that side. Park Place is over there. Yes.
Forget those properties. I'm trying to hit the greens and blues on the board.
There you go.
So to me, it's like, okay, that's how you win Monopoly. The tax code is the rules of life. So if you really want to understand how to win the game of life, how to tap into financial freedom, you need to affiliate yourself with someone who is very well versed in the tax code. Whenever I present, the thing that I always say is, if you take absolutely nothing away from this, the number one thing that you should take away is you should align yourself with a real estate focused CPA. Not a CPA who knows real estate tax code, a CPA who focuses heavily on real estate. The US government is tasked with this responsibility of solving massive problems. There are only two ways in which they can tackle the housing situation. They either tax all of us, or they provide incentives to the wealthy, for the wealthy to put their money into those assets to shoulder this problem and solve the problem. That is what the US government has decided to do, and the rules and the regulations behind it are the US tax code. So every single year, I literally have a meeting with my CPA to say, how do I not pay federal taxes this year?
Mm-hmm.
And they outline the strategy for me to make specific investments that leverage the US tax code. So anyone who's sitting at home complaining, oh, well, these people aren't paying taxes, don't hate the game, play the game. And the way you play the game is really take the time and energy to find yourself a real estate focused CPA. Now, with respect to your second question for using, for financial freedom. Yeah. Financial freedom is not a dollar amount for me, which is why my husband always says, on to the next one, because I'm always like into something, doing something.
Yes, guilty as charged.
Yes. Yeah, guilty as charged for sure.
Guilty as charged, yep.
Over. But it's more for me the ability to cancel on anything at any given time to spend time with my family.
Yeah.
And without any guilt, without any, I want to be respectful of people. I'm not trying to say be disrespectful of people, but if my kids are sick, I don't want to have guilt that I have to give some big presentation when I can't be there for my kids, or supporting them on a play or a sporting event or something like that. Why am I doing all this? This is not easy. I work 7 days a week. I work on every single holiday. I work on every single vacation, 365 days a year. This is something that is aging me so quickly, but it's also providing me the opportunity to have a very flexible schedule. So yes, do I pull all-nighters at least once a month? Yes, I do. But I also, one of my kids have a field trip and they need a chaperone. You can bet your butt I'm going to be the first one signing up for it, and I'm going to be there, and I'm going to be there all day.
Yeah.
So that, to me, it makes all of this worth it. And that's why I can say I have financial freedom. So it's not a dollar figure in the account. It doesn't matter. It's the ability to position yourself in a way that you can make decisions and live your life on your own terms.
Ashley Wilson with Bar Down Investments and Conference Connect, her newest company. I suggest you guys check that out. I've heard very good things about it. Ashley, is there any way that people can get a hold of you if they want to invest through Bar Down, even though I hear right now you guys don't have an active deal, or Conference Connect or your other companies?
We actually do have an active deal.
You do? You do? Oh, cool. Okay.
We have a development deal.
Okay.
So
that
in
makes
the
sense.
DFW market. But if you're interested, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Bad Ash Investor. That's a way to follow everything, or bardowninvestments.com. So I'm pretty public on everything. So you can always Google my name and link everything. But bardowninvestments.com or Bad Ash Investor.
Bad Ash, BADASH, Bad Ash Investor. Yeah. Although you probably have a cool backside as well. we're not highlighting that one at this moment. But that's fantastic that people can get a hold of you. It's great that you have a development fund going right now, and Conference Connect as well. Thank you guys for tuning in to Real Estate Breakthrough. Tune in the next 2 weeks for our next show. See you then.